Good to be with you. Sadly, yes, because I think what is playing out now is straight out of the playbook of what's been happening in the Donbass. As you know, the war there has been on since 2014, and since then, well over 10,000 dead. And what the Russians tend to do is to secure land mostly by artillery, and then they occupy it by boots on the ground. And their strategy, as we're seeing playing out now, very eerily actually, is again to occupy the lands they've held, basically the eastern Donbass region and that southern part, and then to draw the heat up or draw the heat down as they wish by the use of those long-range cruise missiles that can strike as far as Lviv in Ukraine. So that's their way of kind of turning up the heat or down on Ukraine and on the West as they wish. So it's very sad, actually, that it has gone so long with so much territory lost to Ukraine, so much territory lost to Russia, about 1/5 of Ukraine's territory, according to Mr. Zelensky, and of course, so many thousands of innocent civilians' lives.
Indeed. What's your assessment of where things are at now? Is there a side that can claim more victories than the other 100 days on?
Well, certainly Mr. Putin cannot claim victory from his so-called special military operation because he thought it would be a cakewalk and that he could take cities like Kiev and there would be very little resistance. But a couple of things there. The Ukrainian army was much, much better prepared than in 2014 when they took Crimea and Donbass. And secondly, the level of patriotism, the level of will to resist Russia is very, very high. But at the moment, what we're seeing right now is they do control a much bigger percentage of Donetsk and Luhansk, almost entirely Luhansk, as well as they really wanted to get that southern land corridor connecting Crimea with mainland Russia. And now it appears they have Kherson, which is a kind of outpost for them on the west side of the Dnipro River. So strategically very important to them. But having said that, Ukraine has regained so much territory, secured the capital, it's regained Kharkiv and many other strategic areas.
Well, the landscape of Ukraine, how has that changed as many towns and cities recover from sustained attacks?
Well, as I've just described what's been taken, but you know, Yvonne, I mean, it's really incalculable, as I wrote on my blog post today about 100 days, is the real human cost. Mr. Putin has weaponized migration, he's weaponized food, and he's weaponized energy. But one of the biggest things he's done, of course, is he's displaced about a quarter of Ukraine's population. It's hard to fathom. Many people displaced inside Ukraine, but of course many have gone to faraway countries, including Australia. So that will take a very long time to kind of get people back to rebuild. And then also there's the huge, almost incalculable financial cost, upwards of $680 billion to rebuild what's been damaged.
Well, you lived in Ukraine for much of the war. Can you share with us some of your experiences of daily life there over the past 100 days?
Sure. Well, you know, I've been among the most bombed out places in the world, including the Gaza Strip. And what I've seen, you know, in parts of Ukraine, especially Chernihiv, I've not seen anywhere else. You have populated villages where you have 2, 3, sometimes 4 bomb craters, 500-pound bomb craters, and you know, we looked inside these craters, and it's difficult to talk about. You know, you see shredded teddy bears, you see broken toys. It's a symbol of the broken lives that have been caused by these bombs. I lived in Lviv for a long time, around the corner from the military church there, and you cannot walk by. You can walk by on any day and you'll see multiple funerals, sometimes 2, 3, 4 servicemen being buried at one time. You see the families, and it just breaks your heart. It really does.
It really is saddening. In the areas now occupied by Russian forces, how do Ukrainian citizens there carry on with everyday life?
It's extremely difficult because what the Russians are doing, they're eradicating any sense of Ukrainian culture, of Ukrainian life. We've just read reports that the Russians intend to keep schools open in occupied areas so that children can be introduced to Russian curriculum. They get rid of Ukrainian media. They force people to go onto the Russian cell phone network. any sign of Ukrainian life, Ukrainian culture is eradicated. Schools, libraries, that sort of thing. And then yesterday there was a report on Ukrainian media that the Russians forced people trying to evacuate out of Kherson of dropping all the produce they have when there's a food shortage. So forced starvation. And then, of course, finally those mass deportations, upwards of 1 million people forcibly deported to Russia.
What impact have Western sanctions had on the war so far?
Well, certainly not as much as Western leaders had hoped. First of all, these sanctions should have been introduced way before the war was triggered. But secondly, they were introduced in phases, and I don't think Mr. Putin or the inner circle around him are really feeling them. You know, there was a story recently written by an insider who works for a Russian oligarch family, and she said the only difference for them is now they can't go to southern France, they have to go to Dubai. I have always said that the only way these sanctions will become extremely biting for all of his circle is we reach the point where if you're a Russian oligarch or associated with Mr. Putin, the only place you can go to vacation is North Korea or those Spratly Islands that are controlled by the Chinese. That will hit them very hard.
And Michael, do you think we've seen the peak of the attacks so far?
Unfortunately not. We will probably see the peak when the Ukrainians get what they have asked for, that very sophisticated lethal weaponry, but most importantly, the ability to close their skies to long-range cruise missiles from Russia, those that are able to strike Lviv, Kiev, and other populated centers that are not occupied, because that causes so much uncertainty, death, and destruction.
Just finally, amid all these attacks and destruction, you've written about some of the positives that have come out of the war.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, indirectly, Mr. Putin has caused so much unity in the West to help and come defend Ukraine. He's reunited this sense of Ukrainian patriotism that we haven't seen before. And then also, you know, Yvonne, in this restructuring, rebuilding, we may have actually seen the last of that oligarch-controlled economy that has so debilitated Ukraine over the past decades. We may have even seen the end of oligarch-controlled media in Ukraine, which is very important. So we have to also look at these positives that have happened, and of course go anywhere, including Australia. And people know so much about Ukraine now, and there's so much support for the Ukrainian people. It's unprecedented.
Michael Bociurkiw, good to get your thoughts 100 days on since the start of the war. Thank you.
My pleasure.